She sat alone at a table for 10, dressed in a gown that shimmered under the golden chandeliers, but no one noticed. No date, no friends, and not a single person acknowledged her existence, until a billionaire in a tuxedo pulled out the chair beside her and changed everything. Before we dive into what happened next, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because stories like this, you won't want to miss what comes after asterisk. Amelia Hart hadn't expected to attend the wedding. In fact, she almost said no when the invitation arrived, addressed to her, and only her, like a cruel reminder of how isolated her life had become. The bride, Fiona, was her ex-college roommate, a woman she hadn't spoken to in years, not since that fateful falling out over something Amelia couldn't even recall anymore. But curiosity won. Amelia figured she'd show up, congratulate the happy couple, stay for one drink, and slip away into the night, unnoticed. What she didn't anticipate was the sheer force of loneliness that would slam into her the moment she stepped into the grand ballroom. The laughter was loud, the wine was flowing, and every table was buzzing with friends, couples, and shared stories. Every table, except hers, table 17, the farthest one in the corner. She'd been seated there alone, not even a cousin or distant relative, just her and a name card that felt like a cruel joke. Her dress was perfect, a silky, deep emerald gown that clung in all the right places, paired with a modest necklace she inherited from her mother. She looked radiant, but no one looked her way, not even Fiona. The bride passed by once in a blur of white and sparkles, her eyes glossing right over Amelia, like she was air. The only words exchanged were from a drunk groomsman who mistook her for waitstaff and asked for more wine. She smiled politely. She always smiled politely. It was easier that way. She twirled her fork between her fingers, eyes scanning the crowd of people, dancing, toasting, posing for photos. And then, just as she reached for her water glass, a voice low, smooth, confident broke through the noise. "Is this seat taken?" She turned, and time paused. Standing beside her was a man every woman in the room had already noticed, the groom's best friend, billionaire investor, and tabloid mystery, Landon Wolfe. Tall, dark-haired, jaw carved from stone, and eyes that saw more than most people ever did. Amelia blinked, stunned. He smiled. "No," he said, already pulling out the chair. "Good. I'm terrible at weddings, and you look like you could use a wingman." She didn't know what to say. Her throat tightened, and all she could do was nod. The man who'd dated actresses and walked red carpets had just sat beside her like she was the only person in the room. And just like that, table 17 wasn't empty anymore. Landon had noticed her the moment he walked in. Not because of her beauty, though she was stunning, but because she looked like she was trying very hard not to exist. He hated weddings. They were filled with fake smiles, empty toasts, and social climbing. Fiona's wedding was no different. He had flown in out of obligation. The groom was his business partner. But when he spotted Amelia sitting alone, his night changed. She was refreshing real. Her eyes held stories, not headlines. At first, they talked about safe things, the wine, the music, the awkward speeches. But soon their conversation shifted into something deeper. He asked her what she did, and she hesitated before answering, between things. She didn't mention the startup that failed or the promotion that never came. But Landon pressed gently, and she eventually told him about her dreams: publishing a children's book, opening a small creative studio, doing something that mattered. He listened, really listened. That alone made her heart stumble. Landon confessed that, despite his success, he felt hollow. "Money solves problems," he said, "but it doesn't fill the silence in your life." He wasn't cocky like she assumed he'd be. He was thoughtful, funny, even a little broken. Hours passed in what felt like minutes. The band switched to a slow song, and guests filled the dance floor. Landon stood and offered his hand. "Come on," he said. "Let's make them jealous." She hesitated. I don't really dance. He leaned closer. Neither do I. She laughed for the first time that night and placed her hand in his. They danced like they'd known each other for years. People watched. Phones snapped pictures. Fiona, the bride, narrowed her eyes from across the room, but Amelia didn't care. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, truly seen. When the music ended, they didn't return to the table. Instead, they slipped outside, away from the noise. On the garden terrace, under a canopy of stars, Landon leaned on the railing beside her. You don't belong at the edge of rooms, he said. You're the reason rooms light up. She looked away, shy. You don't know me. Not yet, he said, but I'd like to. That was when Fiona appeared. Drunk, furious. Really, Landon? Her? She spat, pointing a jeweled finger. She wasn't even supposed to be here. Amelia's chest tightened. Fiona. But Fiona snapped. You think this is some Cinderella story. He's not going to rescue you. You're just a mistake at my wedding. Amelia turned to leave, humiliated. But Landon stopped her. No, he said to Fiona. The mistake was thinking this wedding was the most important night of your life. Then he turned to Amelia. Let's get out of here. They left the wedding without looking back. Landon's driver was already waiting. They drove aimlessly for a while through the city lights, laughter echoing in the car like they were teenagers, skipping prom. He didn't take her to a 5-star restaurant or a yacht. He took her to a tiny diner downtown, the kind that served coffee in chipped mugs and pies that tasted like childhood. They talked until the sun hinted at morning. They talked about love, failure, fear, hope. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. When he dropped her off at her apartment, he said only this: I want to see you again. Not as a billionaire. Not as the guy from the tabloids. Just as me. She nodded, speechless. The next day, her phone buzzed not with texts from Fiona, who unfriended her immediately, not with judgment, but with headlines. Billionaire leaves wedding with mystery woman. The photo was of them dancing, her laughing, him looking at her like she was everything. Amelia didn't hide. She stood, tall. That week, she emailed a book agent with her manuscript. She opened a blog. She stopped apologizing for taking up space. Weeks turned into months. Landon kept showing up. Dinners, walks, lazy Sundays. And then, one spring morning, he brought her back to the same garden terrace where they first danced. This time, it wasn't a wedding. It was just them. He got down on one knee. No ring yet. Just a promise. No one sees you the way I do, and I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget who you are, she cried. Not because she was sad, but because, finally, someone had sat beside her and stayed. They didn't rush into marriage. They built something first. Love that wasn't about saving each other, but growing together. When they did wed, it wasn't a grand ballroom. It was a rooftop. One long table. No bride hierarchy. Just everyone they loved. One big, loud, messy, beautiful family. And at the center of it all, a table for two. The woman who once sat alone, and the man who chose to sit beside her, not out of pity, but out of recognition. Because sometimes, the most unforgettable love stories don't start with fireworks. They start with silence, and someone brave enough to break it. If this story touched you, made you believe in second chances, or reminded you that even one moment can change everything, hit that subscribe button right now. There are more stories like this coming your way. You never know which one might change your perspective, or your life.